Ooh. Hey, hello everybody. As the title says, I'm Evyatar. I'm a front-end engineer at Meta. We were used to be called Facebook. Some of you probably know this name. And I'll tell you a few facts about myself. First, my top most favorite things in the world are my wife, my cat, and sleeping. Always works. But apart from that, I'm very passionate about dev tooling, library development, API design. And among one of my open source projects that I work on is Vest. Now, I spoke about Vest here on this stage last year. Vest is a form validation library that takes the syntax and style of unit testing libraries like Mocha and Jest. And you'll find it very, very pleasing to the eye, I think. So we have a unit testing or a form validation suite. Inside of it, we have tests that describe what it is that we're validating, for example, the username and the error that the user will see. And then, like expect, we have an assertion, for example, in this case, that the username is not blank. And it's really easy to describe many interesting concepts and form validation with it, but there is a challenge. And when working on my open source libraries and my open source projects, I often come up with challenges that I need to solve, that I need to handle. And because I'm building my own toolchain, I do not necessarily know how to do it, and there are no clear answers. For example, here inside of Vest, well, I have a bit of a problem. So I have my form validation suite, that's the create upstairs, but we also have the test. And I somehow need to pass the name of the test and the form error up to the suite, like that. Okay, that's a problem because I don't see any return statement. I don't see any arguments being passed. It's just, well, declared inside of it. So what do I do? Well, you don't know how Vest is built inside, and this probably means very little to you, so instead I'll try to take it closer to home. Anybody here writes unit tests? Good, very good. So anybody here wrote a unit testing framework? Oh, a few hands raised. That's good. That's very good. So let's build one together. We'll call it, well, we won't call it Jest because it's already taken. We can't call it Vest because Vest already taken. Let's call it Pest because, well, it's stopping bugs. And also it's wearing a vest, right? Very nice. Very cute. I love generative AI. Yeah, gotta love that. And it's going to look very similar to what you already know. Oh, wait, you wanted to take a picture of it. There you go. Sorry. Thank you, Karen. So it's going to look very similar to what you already know from Jest and the others. You're going to have a describe block. Inside of it, you're going to have a test. And inside of it, we're going to have an assertion. And we're going to build all this together. But again, we're going to solve the same problem. First of all, when a test passes or fails, we somehow need to concatenate the name of the name of the describe block with the name of the test or the error message of the test. So how do you do that? How do you connect the test and the describe? Again, no return statement, no arguments being passed, and really one thing that makes it more difficult than what we expect, well, while we do control the subscribe function, it's ours, we do control the test function, well, we're inside of a callback that our users write for us, right? We need to somehow hop over the user implementation and pass the message of the test to the describe or vice versa. So this is what we're going to do. And I had the same issue with Vest, and I tried to solve it. And, well, I imagined, well, I need to do this, but how am I going to do this? I thought about a few possibilities. first of all, is using this. And who like being asked about this in job interviews? Yeah, I thought so. So one of the problems with this in JavaScript is that this is very finicky. It behaves differently depending on where you're coming from, what function is running, if you're in an arrow function, or if you're in a global object or just an object, and like, yeah, that. Of course. So I cannot use this, and also apart from that, even if I have a function inside of, I have the test inside of describe, nothing connects them. Nothing makes them actually relate to one another. It's just a function declared inside another function. We're not really able to control that. So not that. Maybe I could use a global object. Maybe I could set some global, yuck. Maybe I could set a global and, well, store some test value in there and have my test function change it, modify it. But that's also a problem. What if I have multiple tests running at the same time? What prevents one test from modifying the contents of a different test? What's preventing some runtime function to modify it? There is no way to make sure only one function can change the one thing that it's related to. And apart from that, well, it's a global object. It's polluting the global scope, which again, yuck. So no, not global objects. And what about throwing an error? Throwing an error might work because, well, we throw an error and then it bubbles up and then it gets to the function, to the describe function that catches it. But what if we have more tests after that? We just stop the execution of all the tests. So yeah, throwing an error will work for you if you only have one test. But if you have more than one test in your environment, then no, this cannot work. But anybody here uses React? Also good. But I think React already solved this, like at least for React. They have React context, right? What React context allows us to do, and let's read it from the doc. Context provides a way to pass data through the component tree without having to pass props down manually at every level. So basically, it allows us to avoid passing the arguments down, the props down, and we can create a provider and a context reference and then pass it into the component even remotely. So we can, instead of pass the props down at every level, just hop over the rest of the implementation and use it where we need. And this could be nice, right? And the way React does it, and the reason React is able to actually achieve this, is because our React application is actually represented as a tree. And when we use a context provider, we're actually able to wrap some node with our values and use it wherever we need. And well, when we write our unit testing framework, and we're going to do this in a second, but when we write our unit testing framework, well, it could also be described as a tree, right? Because we have our describes and our tests, yeah? Why not use context? So if we did use context, like if we did use context in our unit testing library, how would that work? First, we need to understand the anatomy of a context, what React context really looks like internally. First of all, we have React create context. This is the public-facing API. We create a reference for our context that will later on anchor to. We also have the context provider. We take it from the context reference that we just created. We pass the value into it. And then we have React use context that we use down there in the components and actually retrieve the value from the context reference. So we have these three, right? And then what if we could, well, create a past context, remember past our unit testing library, and then use our provider and use context, just as we would do in React, right? But there's one problem. Well, we have this, past context.provider value message. This is not JavaScript. This is React. This is JSX. It cannot run unless we transpile it to something that works. But, well, maybe we can do something about it. So first of all, let's see what React context actually looks like if we try to import it. So let's do something like import create context. You seeing it? Yeah. Okay, and then what do we have there? So we have, let's see, we have some ref, type of simple React context. I don't know what it means. We have the current value. We have provider, which is something. We have it looks like something that we cannot really use, right? It looks like something that's internal to React, and we're going to build it from scratch because, well, this is unusable to us. So let's go back to our example. If we did want to build it for ourselves, what would it look like? Oh, yeah. So we have this problem. We have this issue that's not JavaScript, but if it looked like something like this, that's more like it. That's JavaScript. It's only a slight change, right? But we're still using the same API. So to do this, what do we need to do? What do we have? What are the tools and fundamentals that we need to understand? And I think there are two. First of all, it's JavaScript closures. And JavaScript closures, I think for a beginner, for me at least as a beginner, it was one of the things that would be the most difficult to wrap my head around and understand. But really, it's pretty simple. And today, this is the feature that I love the most about JavaScript, and I use it daily. From the MDN docs, a closure gives you access to an outer function scope from an inner function. This means that if we have a function that's declared within a different function, this inner function will forever have access to that outer function's scope and variables that's declared inside of it. So, and I'm going to ruin it for any recruiters that actually ask this question, but what if we wanted to create a function that counts forever? And this is a very common interview question, at least in Israel. So what I can do is create an autoCount function that has a variable number inside of it, and it returns a different function that increments that number. Now, if I call count, I get a function back that if I call autoCount, I get a function back that forever counts no matter what I call, how many times I call it, it increments the number. So this is cool. And this is how a closure works. The inner function will forever have access to the number variable. Second, the second thing in our tool belt is the JavaScript execution stack or the JavaScript call stack. And the simple truth about JavaScript is that even though we have async functions and the event loop and everything, JavaScript is synchronous and blocking in the sense that in between two lines of JavaScript code, nothing else can run. Nothing can change the variables that we have inside a function that currently is running. So if I have this function, my application, and it has two lines of code, do thing and do another thing, I know that if these are not promises or anything, do thing and do another thing, nothing between do thing and do another thing can come in between and change the values or variables that are declared there. Okay, cool. So before we dive into the actual coding bit, I'm going to ask you all to pause for a second and take a moment of silence for the gods of live demos. No laughing. Thank you. Okay, so let's write some code. What? No laughing, I said. They're real. Okay, so let's delete everything here. And first of all, let's write the skeleton for our unit testing library. This is going to be function test. And what does it take? It takes a message and a callback, right? And this is going to be very, very simple. Try callback. And then console log success and the message. Cool. And we're going to catch it. And this means that if we're successful, then we'll show the success message. And if we're not successful, we'll show the failure message. And one of my only joys in life is that the word failure is the same length of success. So yeah, right? Okay, perfect. And let's do function, describe, and this is going to be a very simple one. It's going to be also a message and a callback. And then the implementation, don't laugh at the implementation. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so we have the describe, we have the test. Let's also write an add function. So Yeah, return n1 plus n2. And let's try the unit testing library that we built to see that it works as expected, and then we'll try to break it. Okay, so let's do test should add to numbers. Yeah, okay, that's English. And oh, we need an assertion library. Let's use enforce from vest because, well, I'm not going to write one for you. Import enforce from vest. Enforce add 1 equals, I hope. Yeah, success. And let's try to break it. Cool, failure and success. Okay, so we have a unit testing, a very basic unit testing library that's running. But again, we want to have it described, right? So let's do. And let's try to see what's going on here. Okay, describe is not defined. Describe. Oh, okay, typo. Okay, so it's still working, but we're not getting the add part of it. And this is the whole thing that we wanted to achieve, right? And as I promised you, we're going to do this with context. So let's build it. Now we saw the API for context, so we have the function create context, right? We already know we're going to need it. We're also going to need use context. That takes a context reference. Cool. Now we don't know what use context returns, but we do know that it takes some context ref. Cool. Perfect. Now we saw the API for context. It has provider and a consumer. So we're going to define these two as well. And also a consumer. Now, what I'm doing here is creating a closure, right? These functions will always have all the values and all the reference. They will always have reference and let's try again. They will always have the values declared within create context available to them, right? That's perfect. So now what do we need? We need the current value, right? So let's do let current value equals, and it's going to be undefined for a while. Okay, so provider and consumer will forever, when executed, have the access to current value. Cool. So consumer, already we know it's going to return the current value. Yeah. And if so, let's also return these two functions. Return these two functions, and it's going to be provider and consumer. By the way, what's your opinion about returning before you actually define the functions? Don't answer. Yeah, so we know this. So use context will probably need to call the consumer. So return context ref dot consumer. Perfect. So use context is already done. We're done with it. Consumer is done. Now provider. What do we need to do with provider? So we've already defined our closure. That's simple. Now we're going to use the other the other concept that we've talked about. We're going to deal with the execution step. So the provider takes two things. It takes the message, the value, or the new value, and it takes a callback. Now, we do know that it runs the callback. Perfect. And the second thing it needs to do is actually modify the current value. So current value equals new value, and then we reset it. Current value equals undefined. Okay, it's reset. Okay, so we have something. I think it's pretty much done. Let's try it. Okay, so inside our describe, let's use our, first let's create our context. So const past context equals create context. Cool. And now let's try to use it. Okay, it's running, but it's not doing anything because we're not using the context yet. So let's try now to actually use context and see if what we've done works. So parent message is going to be use context of past context. Okay, no errors, that's good. Now let's try to concatenate the parent message. Okay, there's something. We're seeing it. There's an add, should add 2 numbers. And let's see if it also works on failure. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so we have a context running. And just to make sure that we cannot actually use that context outside, let's see if it actually is encapsulated into the scope of the function. So let's see. Yeah, we're not seeing it logged. Okay, let's see really if it's going to be logged. No, it's not logged. Perfect, but this is not enough, right? What if we have like nesting of scopes? So for example, what if it's not really just one unit test for add, it's actually a calculator. And we need to do something different here. And we actually want to add multiple nested describes, and here let's do subtract. Subtract. Yeah, sure. Should remove one number from the other, and then let's do 2 minus 1 because I did not write the function, and let's do like 2. And yeah, we have a problem here because, well, we're seeing the subtract, but it's fine, it works, but we're not seeing the calculator, right? So we have like a problem that we do not pass our context all the way down through the levels. So let's do this. The nice thing is that the way it works and the way our context works, we can actually use that context also inside of the parent one, so inside of the describe. So let's go back to the describe function. Where is it? And here, let's do something like this, parent message, and then let's concatenate it like in a lazy way. So const next message will be, I'm out of names, sorry, filter boolean in case one is empty and we're at the top level. And then let's do parent message, and then do join with this because I'm so lazy. Okay, now we'll pass it down. And here is something peculiar. Look what we're doing here. We're seeing failure, calculator, add, should add 2 numbers, but the subtract adds one doesn't get it. Why is that? Let's see. So in our implementation, what we're doing here, and maybe I inserted this bug to begin with, but we're setting it to undefined. And what's going on here is that when we exit the add block, not the add block, not a Chrome extension, but the add block, what we're actually doing is setting the calculator one to undefined, and then we're going back to the subtract. Subtract, yeah? I don't know. I don't remember. We're going back to the subtract. So then we're, of course, losing the calculator one. So all we need to do is, instead of setting it to undefined, let's set it to the previous value. And I think it should work. Const prev value equals current value. So many names. Yeah. Okay, so we have failure, calculator, add, should add 2 numbers, the same for subtract. That's good. So I think we're pretty much done. I think it works. This is a full implementation of context. Of course, there are many other features we can add, like default values that are going to be a bit tricky, TypeScript support, but that's the gist of it. And let's go back to the presentation. So yeah, there's a tiny bit more. I didn't tell you something about myself. I'm a bit of a Tomb Raider. And one of my hobbies is actually making use of old and deprecated NPM packages. So I took the name context. Seriously, I took the name context. You see, that's me there. And I created a package that does exactly this, what we've just talked. And it is pretty much the engine behind Vest. If you want to try Vest and if you want to use it, every data passing inside of Vest actually goes through context. So what I'm showing you actually works and is pretty cool, I think. But there's actually a bit more. If you only use Node, this is already implemented for you. Inside of Node, a few years back, they added async hooks and also async local storage that does the same thing, only with async function support. We can also support async functions, but we need to hack around it. And in Node, because they control the environment, they do it like natively. And it looks pretty much like we just did, like in terms of API. You create your async local storage reference. So these are create context. And then, well, you run it the same way we did with our provider. And like, it's pretty stable. It works very well. Many libraries use it, and you should try it too. And if you want to wait until, well, it hits browsers as well, just so you know, we have a proposal, like not us, we in general, the world of JavaScript, have a proposal for async context for JavaScript that, again, does exactly that and is heavily influenced by the async local storage API in Node. So I can't wait for this to actually reach browsers. And well, that's it about context, but it doesn't really matter if you end up using context or async local storage or not doing this at all. What I try to show you today is when you face a problem, even if it's in a personal project or at work, just try to experiment, try to do new things, build it yourself. Don't be afraid even to mimic and try to learn from what other people do. I think that's the actual secret of success and the actual secret of not burning out and enjoying what you do. So keep exploring, keep having fun, and thank you.